Chapter 13. Well, I catched my breath and most fainted. Shut up on a wreck with such a gang as that. But it warn't no time to be sentimenturing. We'd got to find that boat now, had to have it for ourselves. So we went quaking and shaking down the starboard side, and slow work it was too. Seemed a week before we got to the stern. No sign of a boat. Jim said he didn't believe he could go any further, so scared he hadn't hardly any strength left, he said. But I said, come on, if we get left on this wreck we are in a fix, sure. So on we prowled again. We struck for the stern of the Texas, and found it, and then scrabbled along forwards on the skylight, hanging on from shutter to shutter, for the edge of the skylight was in the water. When we got pretty close to the cross-hall door, there was the skiff, sure enough. I could just barely see her. I felt ever so thankful. In another second I would have been aboard of her, but just then the door opened. One of the men stuck his head out only about a couple of foot from me, and I thought I was gone, but he jerked it in again, and says, "Heave that blame lantern out o' sight, Bill." He flung a bag of something into the boat and then got in himself and sat down. It was Packard. Then Bill he come out and got in. Packard says in a low voice, "E already shove off." I couldn't hardly hang on to the shutters, I was so weak. But Bill says, "Hold on, do you go through him?" "No." "Didn't you?" "No." "So he's got his share o' the cash yet?" "Well, then, come along, no use to take truck and leave money." "Say, won't he suspicion what we're up to?" "Maybe he won't. But we got to have it anyway. Come along." So they got out and went in. The door slammed to because it was on the careen side, and in a half-second I was in the boat, and Jim come tumbling after me. I out with my knife and cut the rope, and away we went. We didn't touch an oar, and we didn't speak nor whisper, nor hardly even breathe. We went gliding swift along, dead silent, past the tip of the paddle box, and past the stern. Then in a second or two more we was 100 yards below the wreck, and the darkness soaked her up, every last sign of her, and we was safe and knowed it. When we was 300 or 400 yards downstream we see the lantern show like a little spark at the Texas door for a second, and we knowed by that the rascals had missed their boat, and was beginning to understand that they was in just as much trouble now as Jim Turner was. Then Jim manned the oars, and we took out after our raft. Now was the first time that I begun to worry about the men. I reckon I hadn't had time to before. I begun to think how dreadful it was even for murderers to be in such a fix. I says to myself, there ain't no telling but I might come to be a murderer myself yet, and then how would I like it? So says I to Jim, the first light we see will land 100 yards below it or above it, in a place where it's a good hiding place for you and the skiff, and then I'll go and fix up some kind of a yarn and get somebody to go for that gang and get them out of their scrape so they can be hung when their time comes. But that idea was a failure, for pretty soon it begun to storm again, and this time worse than ever. The rain poured down and never a light showed, everybody in bed, I reckon. We boomed along down the river, watching for lights and watching for our raft. After a long time the rain let up, but the clouds stayed, and the lightning kept whimpering, and by a flash showed us a black thing ahead, floating, and we made for it. It was the raft, and mighty glad was we to get aboard of it again. We seen a light now away down to the right, on shore. So I said I would go for it. The skiff was half full of plunder which that gang had stole there on the wreck. We hustled it onto the raft in a pile, and I told Jim to float along down, and show a light when he judged he had gone about 2 miles, and keep it burning till I come. Then I manned my oars and shoved for the light. As I got down towards it 3 or 4 more showed, up on a hillside. It was a village. I closed in above the shore light and laid on my oars and floated. As I went by I see it was a lantern hanging on the jackstaff of a double-hull ferry boat. I skimmed around for the watchman, wondering whereabouts he slept, and by I found him roosting on the bitts forward, with his head down between his knees. I gave his shoulder 2 or 3 little shoves and begun to cry. He stirred up in a kind of a startlish way, but when he see it was only me he took a good gap and stretch, and then he says, "Hello, what's up? Don't cry, bub. What's the trouble? I says, Pap and Ma'am and Sis, and then I broke down. He says, oh, dang it now, don't take on so, we all has to have our troubles and this NLL come out all right. What's the matter with him? There, are you the watchman of the boat? Yes, he says, kind of pretty well satisfied like. I'm the captain and the owner and the mate and the pilot and watchman and head deckhand, and sometimes I'm the freight and passengers. I ain't as rich as old Jim Hornback, and I can't be so blame generous and good to Tom, Dick, and Harry as what he is, and slam around money the way he does, but I've told him a many a time I wouldn't trade places with him, for, says I, a sailor's life's the life for me, and I'm derned if I'd live 2 mile out o' town, where there ain't nothing ever goin' on, not for all his spondulics and as much more on top of it. Says I broke in and says, they're in an awful peck of trouble, and who is? Why, Pap and Ma'am and Sis and Miss Hooker, and if you take your ferry boat and go up there, yup, where? Where are they? On the wreck. What wreck? Why, there ain't but one. What, you don't mean the Walter Scott? Yes. Good land. What are they doing there, for gracious sakes? Well, they didn't go there a purpose. I bet they didn't. Why, great goodness, there ain't no chance for 'em if they don't get off mighty quick. Why, how in the nation did they ever get into such a scrape? Easy enough. Miss Hooker was visiting up there to the town, yes, Booth's Landing, go on. She was visiting there at Booth's Landing, and just in the edge of the evening she started over with her nigger woman in the horse ferry to stay all night at her friend's house, Miss what you may call her, I disremember her name, and they lost their steering oar, and swung around and went floating down, stern first, about 2 mile, and saddlebagsed on the wreck, and the ferryman and the nigger woman and the horses was all lost. But Miss Hooker she made a grab and got aboard the wreck. Well, about an hour after dark we come along down in our trading scow, and it was so dark we didn't notice the wreck till we was right on it, and so we saddlebagsed. But all of us was saved but Bill Whipple, and oh, he was the best creetur, I most wish it had been me, I do. My George! It's the beatin'est thing I ever struck. And then what did you all do? Well, we hollered and took on, but it's so wide there we couldn't make nobody hear. So Pap said somebody got to get ashore and get help somehow. I was the only one that could swim, so I made a dash for it, and Miss Hooker she said if I didn't strike help sooner, come here and hunt up her uncle, and he'd fix the thing. I made the land about a mile below, and been fooling along ever since trying to get people to do something, but they said, what, in such a night and such a current? There ain't no sense in it, go for the steam ferry. Now if you'll go and buy Jackson I'd like to, and blame it, I don't know but I will, but who in the dignation's going to pay for it? Do you reckon your Pap? Why that's all right. Miss Hooker she told me particular that her uncle Hornback great guns. Is he her uncle? Looky here, you break for that light over yonder way, and turn out west when you get there, and about a quarter of a mile out you'll come to the tavern, tell em to dart you out to Jim Hornback's, and he'll foot the bill. And don't you fool around any, because he'll want to know the news. Tell him I'll have his niece all safe before he can get to town. Hump yourself, now, I'm going up around the corner here to roust out my engineer. I struck for the light, but as soon as he turned the corner I went back and got into my skiff and bailed her out, and then pulled up shore in the easy water about 600 yards, and tucked myself in among some woodboats, for I couldn't rest easy till I could see the ferry boat start. But take it all around I was feeling ruther comfortable on accounts of taking all this trouble for that gang, for not many would have done it. I wish the widow knowed about it. I judged she would be proud of me for helping these rapscallions, because rapscallions and dead beats is the kind the widow and good people takes the most interest in. Well, before long here comes the wreck, dim and dusky, sliding along down. A kind of cold shiver went through me, and then I struck out for her. She was very deep, and I see in a minute there warn't much chance for anybody being alive in her. I pulled all around her and hollered a little, but there wasn't any answer, all dead still. I felt a little bit heavy-hearted about the gang, but not much, for I reckoned if they could stand it I could. Then here comes the ferry boat, so I shoved for the middle of the river on a long downstream slant, and when I judged I was out of eye reach I laid on my oars, and looked back and see her go and smell around the wreck for Miss Hooker's remainders, because the captain would know her Uncle Hornback would want them, and then pretty soon the ferry boat give it up and went for the shore, and I laid into my work and went a-booming down the river. It did seem a powerful long time before Jim's light showed up, and when it did show it looked like it was 1,000 miles off. By the time I got there the sky was beginning to get a little gray in the east, so we struck for an island and hid the raft and sunk the skiff and turned in and slept like dead people. Chapter 14. By and by when we got up, we turned over the truck the gang had stole off of the wreck and found boots and blankets and clothes and all sorts of other things and a lot of books and a spyglass and 3 boxes of Seegers. We hadn't ever been this rich before in neither of our lives. The Seegers was prime. We laid off all the afternoon in the woods talking and me reading the books and having a general good time. I told Jim all about what happened inside the wreck and at the ferryboat, and I said these kinds of things was adventures, but he said he didn't want no more adventures. He said that when I went in the Texas and he crawled back to get on the raft and found her gone he nearly died, because he judged it was all up with him anyway it could be fixed, for if he didn't get saved he would get drowned dead, and if he did get saved, whoever saved him would send him back home so as to get the reward, and then Miss Watson would sell him south, sure. Well, he was right, he was most always right, he had an uncommon level head for a nigger. I read considerable to Jim about kings and dukes and earls and such, and how gaudy they dressed, and how much style they put on, and called each other your majesty, and your grace, and your lordship, and so on, stead of Mr., and Jim's eyes bugged out, and he was interested. He says, I didn't know dey was so many I hain't hearn bout none scazely but old King Solomon unless you counts dem king's dats in a pack or k yards. How much do a king get? Get? I says, why, they get $1,000 a month if they want it, they can have just as much as they want, everything belongs to them. Ain't dat gay? And what they got to do, Huck? They don't do nothing. Why, how you talk? They just sit around. No, is that so? Of course it is. They just sit around except maybe when there's a war, then they go to the war. But other times they just lazy around or go hawking. Just hawking and SPSH, do you hear a noise? We skipped out and looked, but it warn't nothing but the flutter of a steamboat's wheel away down, coming around the point, so we come back. Yes, says I, and other times, when things is dull, they fuss with the parliament, and if everybody don't go just so he whacks their heads off. But mostly they hang round the harem. Roon de witch? Harem. What's the harem? See 14-110.jpg 70k. The place where he keeps his wives. Don't you know about the harem? Solomon had one, he had about 1 million wives. Why, yes, that's so, I done forgot it. A harem's a beau den house I reckon. Most likely dey has rackety times in de nursery. En I reckon de wife's quartels considerable, en dat Christ de recket. Yet dey say Solomon de wisest man dat ever live. I don't take no stock in dat. Because why, would a wise man want to live in de mids or sich a blimblammin all de time? No, deed he wouldn't. A wise man ud take en bill a biler factory, en den he could shet down de biler factory when he want to res. Well, but he was the wisest man anyway because the widow she told me so her own self. I don't care what de widder say, he warn't no wise man nother. He had some de dad-fetched ways I ever see. Does you know about dat chili dat he usie gwine to chop in too? Yes, the widow told me all about it. Well den. Won't dat the beatenest notion in the world? You just take en look at it a minute. Das de stump, dat's one de women, hes you dat's de uter one, is Solomon, en dish year dollar bills de chili. Both on you claims it. What does I do? Does I shin around mongs de neighbors en find out? Which en you de bill do belong to, en han it over to de right one, all safe en sown, de way dat anybody dat had any gumption would. No, I take and whack the bill in two, and give half on it to you, and the other half to the other woman. That's the way Solomon was gwine to do with the chili. Now I want to ask you, what's the use er dat half a bill can't buy nothin' with it? And what use is a half a chili? I wouldn't give a dern for a million But hang it Jim, you've clean missed the point, blame it, you've missed it 1,000 mile. Who? Me? Go long. Don't talk to me about yo pints. I reckon I knows sense when I sees it, and day I no sense in sich doin's as dat. Dispute warn't bout a half a chili, dispute was bout a whole chili, and de man dat think he kin settle a spute bout a whole chili wid a half a chili don't know enough to come in out and de rain. Don't talk to me bout Solomon Huck, I knows him by de back. But I tell you don't get the point. Blam de point. I reckon I knows what I knows. And mind you, de real pint is down further, it's down deeper. It lays in de way Solomon was raised. You take a man dat's got only 1 or 2 chillin', is dat man gwine to be wasteful o' chillin'? No he ain't, he can't afford it. He know how to value 'em. But you take a man dat's got bout 5 million chillin' runnin' ruin de house, and it's defunt. He as soon chop a chili in two as a cat. Des plenty montauk. A chili or two, mo or less, warn't no consequence to Solomon, dad fetch him. I never see such a nigger. If he got a notion in his head once, there warn't no getting it out again. He was the most down on Solomon of any nigger I ever see. So I went to talking about other kings and let Solomon slide. I told about Louis XVI that got his head cut off in France long time ago, and about his little boy the Dolphin, that would have been a king, but they took and shut him up in jail, and some say he died there. A little chap. But some says he got out and got away, and come to America. That's good. But he'll be pooty lonesome day I no kings here is day Huck? No. Den he can't get no situation. What he gwine to do? Well I don't know. Some of them gets on the police, and some of them learns people how to talk French. Why Huck don't the French people talk the same way we does? No Jim, you couldn't understand a word they said, not a single word. Well now I be ding busted. How did that come? I don't know, but it's so. I got some of their jabber out of a book. S'pose a man was to come to you and say parlez-vous Franzi, what would you think? I wouldn't think nothing, I'd take and bust him over the head, that is if he weren't white. I wouldn't low no nigger to call me dat. Shucks, it ain't calling you anything. It's only saying, do you know how to talk French? Well den, why couldn't he say it? Why, he is saying it. That's a Frenchman's way of saying it. Well, it's a blame ridiculous way, and I don't want to hear no mo about it. Day I no sense in it. Looky here Jim, does a cat talk like we do? No, a cat don't. Well, does a cow? No, a cow don't nuther. Does a cat talk like a cow, or a cow talk like a cat? No, they don't. It's natural and right for 'em to talk different from each other, ain't it? Course. And ain't it natural and right for a cat and a cow to talk different from us? Why, most surely it is. Well then, why ain't it natural and right for a Frenchman to talk different from us? You answer me that. Is a cat a man, Huck? No. Well den, they ain't no sense in a cat talkin' like a man. Is a cow a man, or is a cow a cat? No, she ain't either of them. Well den, she ain't got no business to talk like either one or the other of 'em. Is a Frenchman a man? Yes. Well den. Dad blame it, why don't he talk like a man? You answer me dat. I see it warn't no use wasting words, you can't learn a nigger to argue. So I quit. Chapter 15. We judged that 3 nights more would fetch us to Cairo, at the bottom of Illinois where the Ohio River comes in, and that was what we was after. We would sell the raft and get on a steamboat and go way up the Ohio amongst the free states, and then be out of trouble. Well, the second night a fog begun to come on, and we made for a towhead to tie to, for it wouldn't do to try to run in a fog. But when I paddled ahead in the canoe, with the line to make fast, there weren't anything but little saplings to tie to. I passed the line around one of them right on the edge of the cut bank, but there was a stiff current, and the raft come booming down so lively she tore it out by the roots, and away she went. I see the fog closing down, and it made me so sick and scared I couldn't budge for most a half a minute it seemed to me, and then there weren't no raft in sight. You couldn't see 20 yards. I jumped into the canoe and run back to the stern and grabbed the paddle and set her back a stroke. But she didn't come. I was in such a hurry I hadn't untied her. I got up and tried to untie her, but I was so excited my hands shook so I couldn't hardly do anything with them. As soon as I got started I took out after the raft, hot and heavy, right down the towhead. That was all right as far as it went, but the towhead weren't 60 yards long, and the minute I flew by the foot of it I shot out into the solid white fog, and hadn't no more idea which way I was going than a dead man. Thinks I, it won't do to paddle, first I know I'll run into the bank or a towhead or something. I got to set still and float, and yet it's mighty fidgety business to have to hold your hands still at such a time. I hooped and listened. Away down there somewheres I hears a small whoop, and up comes my spirits. I went tearing after it, listening sharp to hear it again. The next time it come I see I weren't heading for it, but heading away to the right of it. And the next time I was heading away to the left of it, and not gaining on it much either, for I was flying around this way and that and t'other, but it was going straight ahead all the time. I did wish the fool would think to beat a tin pan, and beat it all the time, but he never did, and it was the still places between the whoops that was making the trouble for me. Well, I fought along, and directly I hears the whoop behind me. I was tangled good now. That was somebody else's whoop, or else I was turned around. I throwed the paddle down. I heard the whoop again. It was behind me yet, but in a different place. It kept coming and kept changing its place, and I kept answering, till by and by it was in front of me again, and I knowed the current had swung the canoe's head downstream, and I was all right if that was Jim and not some other raftsman hollering. I couldn't tell nothing about voices in a fog, for nothing don't look natural nor sound natural in a fog. The whooping went on, and in about a minute I come booming down on a cut bank with smoky ghosts of big trees on it, and the current throwed me off to the left and shot by amongst a lot of snags that fairly roared. The current was tearing by them so swift. In another second or two it was solid white and still again. I sat perfectly still then, listening to my heart thump, and I reckon I didn't draw a breath while it thumped 100. I just give up then. I knowed what the matter was. That cut bank was an island, and Jim had gone down t'other side of it. It warn't no towhead that you could float by in 10 minutes. It had the big timber of a regular island. It might be 5 or 6 miles long and more than half a mile wide. I kept quiet, with my ears cocked, about 15 minutes I reckon. I was floating along, of course, 4 or 5 miles an hour, but you don't ever think of that. No, you feel like you are laying dead still on the water, and if a little glimpse of a snag slips by you don't think to yourself how fast you're going, but you catch your breath and think, my, how that snag's tearing along. If you think it ain't dismal and lonesome out in a fog that way by yourself in the night, you try it once, you'll see. Next, for about a half an hour, I whoops now and then. At last I hears the answer a long ways off, and tries to follow it, but I couldn't do it, and directly I judged I'd got into a nest of towheads, for I had little dim glimpses of them on both sides of me, sometimes just a narrow channel between. And some that I couldn't see I knowed was there because I'd hear the wash of the current against the old dead brush and trash that hung over the banks. Well, I warn't long loosing the whoops down amongst the towheads, and I only tried to chase them a little while anyway, because it was worse than chasing a jack-o'-lantern. You never know to sound dodge around so, and swap places so quick and so much. I had to claw away from the bank pretty lively 4 or 5 times to keep from knocking the islands out of the river, and so I judged the raft must be butting into the bank every now and then, or else it would get further ahead and clear out of hearing. It was floating a little faster than what I was. Well, I seemed to be in the open river again by and by, but I couldn't hear no sign of a whoop nowheres. I reckon Jim had fetched up on a snag maybe and it was all up with him. I was good and tired, so I laid down in the canoe and said I wouldn't bother no more. I didn't want to go to sleep of course, but I was so sleepy I couldn't help it, so I thought I would take just one little cat nap. But I reckon it was more than a cat nap, for when I waked up the stars was shining bright, the fog was all gone, and I was spinning down a big bend stern first. First I didn't know where I was, I thought I was dreaming, and when things began to come back to me they seemed to come up dim out of last week. It was a monstrous big river here, with the tallest and the thickest kind of timber on both banks, just a solid wall as well as I could see by the stars. I looked away downstream and seen a black speck on the water. I took after it, but when I got to it it warn't nothing but a couple of sawlogs made fast together. Then I see another speck and chased that, then another, and this time I was right. It was the raft. When I got to it Jim was sitting there with his head down between his knees asleep, with his right arm hanging over the steering oar. The other oar was smashed off and the raft was littered up with leaves and branches and dirt. So she'd had a rough time. I made fast and laid down under Jim's nose on the raft and began to gap and stretch my fists out against Jim and says, "Hello, Jim, have I been asleep? Why didn't you stir me up? Goodness gracious, is that you, Huck? And you I'm dead, you I'm drowned dead, you's back again? It's too good for true, honey, it's too good for true. Let me look at you chilly, let me feel o you. No, you I'm dead. You's back again, live and sewn, jis de same ol' Huck, thanks to goodness. What's the matter with you, Jim? You been a-drinking? Drinkin'? Has I been a-drinkin'? Has I had a chance to be a-drinkin'? Well then what makes you talk so wild? How does I talk wild? How? Why, hain't you been talking about my coming back and all that stuff as if I'd been gone away? Huck Finn, you look me in the eye, look me in the eye. Hain't you been gone away? Gone away? Why, what in the nation do you mean? I hain't been gone anywheres. Where would I go to? Well, looky here, boss, dey's somefen wrong, dey is. Is I me or who is I? Is I here or why is I? Now that's what I wants to know. Well, I think you're here, plain enough, but I think you're a tangle-headed old fool, Jim. I is I? Well, you answer me dis, didn't you toad out de line in de canoe fair to make fast to de towhead? No, I didn't. What towhead? I hain't seen no towhead. You hain't seen no towhead? Looky here, didn't de line pull loose and the rough go a hum in down the river, and leave you and the canoe behine in the fog? What fog? Why, the fog that's been around all night. And didn't you whoop, and didn't I whoop, till we got mixed up in the islands and one on us got los and t'other one was G's as good as los, case he didn't know wha he was? And didn't I bust up again a lot dem islands and have a tuable time and mos get drowned dead? Now I'm dat so, boss, ain't it so? You answer me dat. Well, this is too many for me, Jim. I hain't seen no fog, nor no islands, nor no troubles, nor nothing. I been setting here talking with you all night till you went to sleep about 10 minutes ago, and I reckon I done the same. You couldn't a got drunk in that time, so of course you've been dreaming. Dad fetch it, how is I gwine to dream all dat in 10 minutes? Well, hang it all, you did dream it, because there didn't any of it happen. But Huck, it's all G's as plain to me as, it don't make no difference how plain it is, there ain't nothing in it. I know, because I've been here all the time. Jim didn't say nothing for about 5 minutes, but sat there studying over it. Then he says, well den, I reckon I did dream it, Huck, but dog my cat's ef it ain't the powerfulest dream I ever see. And I hain't ever had no dream bfo that's tired me like this one. Oh well, that's alright, because a dream does tire a body like everything sometimes. But this one was a staving dream, tell me all about it, Jim. So Jim went to work and told me the whole thing right through, just as it happened, only he painted it up considerable. Then he said he must start in and interpret it, because it was sent for a warning. He said the first towhead stood for a man that would try to do us some good, but the current was another man that would get us away from him. The whoops was warnings that would come to us every now and then, and if we didn't try hard to make out to understand them, they'd just take us into bad luck, instead of keeping us out of it. The lot of towheads was troubles we was going to get into with quarrelsome people and all kinds of mean folks, but if we minded our business and didn't talk back and aggravate them, we would pull through and get out of the fog and into the big clear river, which was the Free States, and wouldn't have no more trouble. It had clouded up pretty dark just after I got onto the raft, but it was clearing up again now. "Oh well, that's all interpreted well enough as far as it goes, Jim," I says, "but what does these things stand for?" It was the leaves and rubbish on the raft and the smashed oar. You could see them first rate now. Jim looked at the trash and then looked at me and back at the trash again. He had got the dream fixed so strong in his head that he couldn't seem to shake it loose and get the facts back into its place again right away. But when he did get the thing straightened around, he looked at me steady without ever smiling and says, "What do they stand for?" "I see gwine to tell you. When I got all wore out wid work and wid de callan for you, and went to sleep, my heart was mos broke because you was los, and I didn't care no mo what become me and de raff. And when I wake up and find you back again, all safe and sown, de tears come, and I coulda got down on my knees and kiss yo foot, I's so thankful. And all you was thinkin' bout was how you could make a fool of old Jim wid a lie. Dat drukte is trash, and trash is what people is dat put stuurt onder het RD friends and makes am ashamed." Then he got up slow and walked to the wigwam and went in there without saying anything but that. But that was enough. It made me feel so mean I could almost kissed his foot to get him to take it back. It was 15 minutes before I could work myself up to go and humble myself to a nigger, but I done it, and I warn't ever sorry for it afterwards, neither. I didn't do him no more mean tricks, and I wouldn't done that one if I'd a knowed it would make him feel that way. Chapter 16. We slept most all day and started out at night a little ways behind a monstrous long raft that was as long going by as a procession. She had 4 long sweeps at each end, so we judged she carried as many as 30 men, likely. She had 5 big wigwams aboard, wide apart, and an open campfire in the middle and a tall flagpole at each end. There was a power of style about her. It amounted to something being a raftsman on such a craft as that. We went drifting down into a big bend, and the night clouded up and got hot. The river was very wide, and was walled with solid timber on both sides. You couldn't see a break in it hardly ever, or a light. We talked about Cairo, and wondered whether we would know it when we got to it. I said likely we wouldn't, because I had heard say there weren't but about a dozen houses there, and if they didn't happen to have them lit up, how was we going to know we was passing a town? Jim said if the 2 big rivers joined together there, that would show. But I said maybe we might think we was passing the foot of an island and coming into the same old river again. That disturbed Jim and me too. So the question was what to do. I said, paddle ashore the first time a light showed, and tell them Pap was behind, coming along with a trading scow, and was a green hand at the business, and wanted to know how far it was to Cairo. Jim thought it was a good idea, so we took a smoke on it and waited. There weren't nothing to do now but to look out sharp for the town, and not pass it without seeing it. He said he'd be mighty sure to see it, because he'd be a free man the minute he seen it, but if he missed it he'd be in a slave country again and no more show for freedom. Every little while he jumps up and says, "Da she is." But it warn't. It was jack-o'-lanterns or lightning bugs, so he sat down again, and went to watching, same as before. Jim said it made him all over trembly and feverish to be so close to freedom. Well, I can tell you it made me all over trembly and feverish too, to hear him, because I begun to get it through my head. That he was most free, and who was to blame for it? Why me? I couldn't get that out of my conscience, no how nor no way. It got to troubling me so I couldn't rest, I couldn't stay still in one place. It hadn't ever come home to me before, what this thing was that I was doing. But now it did, and it stayed with me, and scorched me more and more. I tried to make out to myself that I weren't to blame because I didn't run Jim off from his rightful owner, but it weren't no use. Conscience up and says every time, but you knowed he was running for his freedom and you could have paddled ashore and told somebody. That was so, I couldn't get around that no way. That was where it pinched. Conscience says to me, what had poor Miss Watson done to you that you could see her nigger go off right under your eyes and never say one single word? What did that poor old woman do to you that you could treat her so mean? Why, she tried to learn you your book, she tried to learn you your manners, she tried to be good to you every way she knowed how. That's what she done. I got to feeling so mean and so miserable I most wished I was dead. I fidgeted up and down the raft, abusing myself to myself, and Jim was fidgeting up and down past me. We neither of us could keep still. Every time he danced around and says, "Das Cairo," it went through me like a shot, and I thought if it was Cairo I reckoned I would die of miserableness. Jim talked out loud all the time while I was talking to myself. He was saying how the first thing he would do when he got to a free state he would go to saving up money and never spend a single cent, and when he got enough he would buy his wife, which was owned on a farm close to where Miss Watson lived, and then they would both work to buy the 2 children, and if their master wouldn't sell them, they'd get an abolitionist to go and steal them. It most froze me to hear such talk. He wouldn't ever dared to talk such talk in his life before. Just see what a difference it made in him the minute he judged he was about free. It was according to the old saying, give a nigger an inch and he'll take an ell. Thinks I, this is what comes of my not thinking. Here was this nigger, which I had as good as helped to run away, coming right out flat-footed and saying he would steal his children, children that belonged to a man I didn't even know, a man that hadn't ever done me no harm. I was sorry to hear Jim say that. It was such a lowering of him. My conscience got to stirring me up hotter than ever, until at last I says to it, let up on me, it ain't too late yet, I'll paddle ashore at the first light and tell. I felt easy and happy and light as a feather right off. All my troubles was gone. I went to looking out sharp for a light and sort of singing to myself. By and by one showed. Jim sings out, "We safe, Huck, we safe. Jump up and crack yo heels. That's the good old Cairo at Las Ijis knows it." I says, I'll take the canoe and go and see Jim. It mightn't be, you know. He jumped and got the canoe ready, and put his old coat in the bottom for me to set on, and give me the paddle, and as I shoved off, he says, "Pooty soon I'll be a shoutin' for joy, and I'll say, it's all on accounts o' Huck, I's a free man, and I couldn't ever been free if it hadn't been for Huck, Huck done it. Jim won't ever forget you, Huck, you's the best friend Jim's ever had, and you's the only friend old Jim's got now." I was paddling off, all in a sweat to tell on him, but when he says this it seemed to kind of take the tuck all out of me. I went along slow then, and I warn't right down certain whether I was glad I started or whether I warn't. When I was 50 yards off, Jim says, "Da you goes, de old true Huck, de only white gentleman dat ever kep his promise to old Jim." Well, I just felt sick. But I says I got to do it, I can't get out of it. Right then along comes a skiff with 2 men in it with guns, and they stopped and I stopped. One of them says, "What's that yonder?" "A piece of a raft," I says. "Do you belong on it?" "Yes, sir." "Any men on it?" "Only one, sir." "Well, there's 5 niggers run off tonight up yonder, above the head of the bend. Is your man white or black?" I didn't answer up prompt. I tried to, but the words wouldn't come. I tried for a second or two to brace up and out with it, but I warn't man enough, hadn't the spunk of a rabbit. I see I was weakening, so I just give up trying and up and says, "He's white. I reckon we'll go and see for ourselves." "I wish you would," says I, "because it's Pap that's there, and maybe you'd help me tow the raft ashore where the light is. He's sick, and so is Mam and Marianne." "Oh, the devil. We're in a hurry, boy. But I suppose we've got to. Come, buckle to your paddle, and let's get along." I buckled to my paddle and they laid to their oars. When we had made a stroke or two, I says, "Pap'll be mighty much obleeged to you, I can tell you." Everybody goes away when I want them to help me tow the raft ashore, and I can't do it by myself. Well, that's infernal mean. Odd too. Say boy, what's the matter with your father? It's well, it ain't anything much. They stopped pulling. It warn't but a mighty little ways to the raft now. One says, boy, that's a lie. What is the matter with your pap? Answer up square now, and it'll be the better for you. I will, sir, I will, honest, but don't leave us, please. It's the gentleman, if you'll only pull ahead, and let me heave you the headline, you won't have to come near the raft, please do. Set her back, John, set her back, says one. They backed water. Keep away, boy, keep to Lord. Confound it, I just expect the wind has blowed it to us. Your pap's got the smallpox, and you know it precious well. Why didn't you come out and say so? Do you want to spread it all over? Well, says I, blubbering, I've told everybody before, and they just went away and left us. Poor devil, there's something in that. We are right down sorry for you, but well, hang it, we don't want the smallpox, you see. Look here, I'll tell you what to do. Don't you try to land by yourself or you'll smash everything to pieces. You float along down about 20 miles and you'll come to a town on the left-hand side of the river. It will be long after sunup then, and when you ask for help you tell them your folks are all down with chills and fever. Don't be a fool again and let people guess what is the matter. Now we're trying to do you a kindness, so you just put 20 miles between us, that's a good boy. It wouldn't do any good to land yonder where the light is, it's only a wood yard. Say, I reckon your father's poor, and I'm bound to say he's in pretty hard luck. Here, I'll put a $20 gold piece on this board, and you get it when it floats by. I feel mighty mean to leave you, but my kingdom. It won't do to fool with smallpox, don't you see? Hold on, Parker, says the other man, here's a 20 to put on the board for me. Goodbye, boy, you do as Mr. Parker told you, and you'll be all right. That's so, my boy, goodbye, goodbye. If you see any runaway niggers you get help and nab them, and you can make some money by it. Goodbye, sir, says I won't let no runaway niggers get by me if I can help it. They went off and I got aboard the raft, feeling bad and low, because I knowed very well I had done wrong, and I see it warn't no use for me to try to learn to do right. A body that don't get started right when he's little ain't got no show, when the pinch comes there ain't nothing to back him up and keep him to his work, and so he gets beat. Then I thought a minute and says to myself, hold on, suppose you'd a done right and give Jim up, would you felt better than what you do now? No, says I'd feel bad, I'd feel just the same way I do now. Well then, says I, what's the use you learning to do right when it's troublesome to do right, and ain't no trouble to do wrong, and the wages is just the same? I was stuck. I couldn't answer that. So I reckoned I wouldn't bother no more about it, but after this always do whichever come handiest at the time. I went into the wigwam, Jim warn't there. I looked all around, he warn't anywhere. I says, Jim. Here I is, Huck. Is day out o' sight yit? Don't talk loud. He was in the river under the stern oar, with just his nose out. I told him they were out of sight, so he come aboard. He says, I was a-listenin' to all the talk, and I slips into the river and was gwine to shove for show if day come aboard. Den I was gwine to swim to de raft agin when day was gone. But lawsy how you did fool Huck. Dat was de smarts Dutch. I tell you, Chilly, ispeck it save old Jim ain't going to forget you for dat, honey. Then we talked about the money. It was a pretty good raise, $20 apiece. Jim said we could take deck passage on a steamboat now, and the money would last us as far as we wanted to go in the Free States. He said 20 mile more warn't far for the raft to go, but he wished we was already there. Towards daybreak we tied up, and Jim was mighty particular about hiding the raft good. Then he worked all day fixing things in bundles and getting all ready to quit rafting. That night about 10 we hove in sight of the lights of a town away down in a left-hand bend. I went off in the canoe to ask about it. Pretty soon I found a man out in the river with a skiff setting a trot line. I ranged up and says, Mister, is that town Cairo? Cairo? No. You must be a blame fool. What town is it, mister? If you want to know, go and find out. If you stay here both Aaron around me for about a half a minute longer, you'll get something you won't want. I paddled to the raft. Jim was awful disappointed, but I said never mind, Cairo would be the next place I reckoned. We passed another town before daylight and I was going out again, but it was high ground so I didn't go. No high ground about Cairo, Jim said. I had forgot it. We laid up for the day on a towhead tolerable close to the left-hand bank. I begun to suspicion something. So did Jim. I says, maybe we went by Cairo in the fog that night. He says, don't lease talk about it, Huck. Paniggers can't have no luck. I allus spect dat rattlesnakeskin warn't done wid its work. I wish I'd never seen that snakeskin, Jim, I do wish I'd never laid eyes on it. It ain't yo fault, Huck, you didn't know. Don't you blame yourself 'bout it. When it was daylight, here was the clear Ohio water inshore sure enough, and outside was the old regular muddy. So it was all up with Cairo. We talked it all over. It wouldn't do to take to the shore, we couldn't take the raft up the stream, of course. There weren't no way but to wait for dark and start back in the canoe and take the chances. So we slept all day amongst the cottonwood thicket, so as to be fresh for the work, and when we went back to the raft about dark the canoe was gone. We didn't say a word for a good while. There weren't anything to say. We both knowed well enough it was some more work of the rattlesnakeskin, so what was the use to talk about it? It would only look like we was finding fault, and that would be bound to fetch more bad luck, and keep on fetching it too, till we knowed enough to keep still. By and by we talked about what we better do, and found there weren't no way but just to go along down with the raft till we got a chance to buy a canoe to go back in. We weren't going to borrow it when there weren't anybody around the way Pap would do, for that might set people after us. So we shoved out after dark on the raft. Anybody that don't believe yet that it's foolishness to handle a snakeskin after all that snakeskin done for us, will believe it now if they read on and see what more it done for us. The place to buy canoes is off of rafts laying up at shore. But we didn't see no rafts laying up, so we went along during 3 hours and more. Well, the night got gray and ruther thick, which is the next meanest thing to fog. You can't tell the shape of the river and you can't see no distance. It got to be very late and still, and then along comes a steamboat up the river. We lit the lantern and judged she would see it. Upstream boats didn't generally come close to us, they go out and follow the bars and hunt for easy water under the reefs, but nights like this they bull right up the channel against the whole river. We could hear her pounding along, but we didn't see her good till she was close. She aimed right for us. Often they do that and try to see how close they can come without touching. Sometimes the wheel bites off a sweep, and then the pilot sticks his head out and laughs, and thinks he's mighty smart. Well, here she comes, and we said she was going to try and shave us, but she didn't seem to be shearing off a bit. She was a big one, and she was coming in a hurry too. Looking like a black cloud with rows of glowworms around it, but all of a sudden she bulged out, big and scary, with a long row of wide-open furnace doors shining like red-hot teeth, and her monstrous bows and guards hanging right over us. There was a yell at us, and a jingling of bells to stop the engines, a powwow of cussing and whistling of steam, and as Jim went overboard on one side and I on the other, she come smashing straight through the raft. I dived and I aimed to find the bottom too, for a 30-foot wheel had got to go over me and I wanted it to have plenty of room. I could always stay underwater a minute, this time I reckon I stayed under a minute and a half. Then I bounced for the top in a hurry, for I was nearly busting. I popped out to my armpits and blowed the water out of my nose and puffed a bit. Of course there was a booming current, and of course that boat started her engines again 10 seconds after she stopped them, for they never cared much for raftsmen, so now she was churning along up the river, out of sight in the thick weather, though I could hear her. I sung out for Jim about a dozen times, but I didn't get any answer, so I grabbed a plank that touched me while I was treading water, and struck out for shore, shoving it ahead of me. But I made out to see that the drift of the current was towards the left-hand shore, which meant that I was in a crossing, so I changed off and went that way. It was one of these long, slanting, 2-mile crossings, so I was a good long time in getting over. I made a safe landing and clumb up the bank. I couldn't see but a little ways, but I went poking along over rough ground for a 1/4 of a mile or more, and then I run across a big old-fashioned double log house before I noticed it. I was going to rush by and get away, but a lot of dogs jumped out and went to howling and barking at me, and I knowed better than to move another peg.